Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
When talking about community, we usually talk about it like a feeling. Belonging, connection, finding your people. But I've been thinking a lot about whether that's actually what community is for. Because historically, community wasn't really about comfort. It was about care and accountability, even showing up when it was inconvenient. The emotional benefits mattered, but they weren't the primary purpose. I want us to step back and ask what community really means today and what happens when those structures quietly disappear.
I'm interested in the trade-offs here. We live in a time where community is more optional than it's ever been before. You can opt in, opt out, curate, leave, rebuild. That gives us freedom, but it also changes how durable a group can be. So we're going to talk about how we moved from inherited communities to chosen ones, why low exit costs matter, and whether a society built on constant choice can actually sustain community over the long haul.
From my perspective, community has meant different things at different stages of life. When you're young, it's about belonging and becoming. Later, it's about who you can count on and who you're willing to let count on you. I've watched communities hold people together, and I've watched them fall apart. This episode isn't about going back to the past, but about asking what we've learned, what we've lost, and what we still need if we want communities that last. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom.
I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Mom. So this one is, I think, can be kind of fun because I think when you talk about community, it's a warmer feeling than some of the topics that we've covered.
Vigilante justice didn't do it for you, huh?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, and I think that once I kind of started digging into this, looking at historical reference points as to what community was and how it has shifted was really fascinating to me because I didn't really think about it changing until I thought about it changing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, as we talk about this, I think about my grandmother my grandfather was away working on one of the works projects that was done during the war. And so she was alone with a small child and she got involved with the local, probably what we would call home ec or FFA today, but teaching women how to can and put things away. And they created their community because their lives were so disrupted.
Which leads me to kind of a totally tangent thought here. How does it work? How has it varied from men to women? Like when you're talking about your grandfather being away at this public works project, was he building community there? Or is he just kind of got his head down, doing his job, ready to go home?
That's an interesting thought. I've never heard stories about what his was like, except that that's where he got his nickname, Pete. His name was Andrew, and for some reason, all of my life, he's been called Pete. I didn't call him Papa or Grandpa. He was Pete because he got that while he was working on the dam. I don't know where.
So he's built some type of community, like it or not.
Yeah, must have.
Interesting. But then you're talking about the women who are learning things and doing all of this together. I just feel like there's a pretty big divide in that difference. Not good or bad, just different.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it from sex.
If I think about it, I wonder if our communities are different. Are women valuing those relationships more than men do? Or, are men smoking in their cigars and drinking their scotch or bourbon and women are doing
more in-depth
yeah.
learning and figuring and solutions.
Yeah. I'm curious.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive into the history of community a little bit. So long before any social media apps or government programs, community handled much of the daily survival and social order. its core functions included things like mutual aid for childcare or food or elder care, illness. I'm thinking meal trains and things like that. Oh, so and so's sick, we have to take food over. So and so just had a baby, we have to take food over.
See, I'm thinking about farmers. I mean, because I know when my grandfather had a heart attack, all of the neighbors came in and harvested his crops for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Information sharing and trust building. I mean, I think that kind of falls right in line with what you're talking about. They knew that he needed help and they
Yeah.
just showed up because they trusted that if something happened to him, everybody would show up for them.
Yeah.
I think another part of it is that was interesting and fascinating to think about is the norm enforcement side of it. Hey, this is what we deem to be socially acceptable behavior. This is what we are teaching to our children and the standard by which we are holding ourselves accountable. And so each of those little pockets of community, you can look and see this pocket thinks this, or this pocket abides by these rules. And so I wasn't really thinking about the norm enforcement, but how that really plays into it, I thought was interesting. The
Yeah, I
shared
think
expectations.
that's a fascinating facet of this is what is socially acceptable. I mean, and how much of that have we lost by the change in our communities?
Right. Well, and we've sat here on this podcast on several occasions and talked about, oh, we've lost this. Oh, we don't do this anymore. Oh, we don't value or prioritize this. But I truly do believe that those values, roles, traditions come from your community. You are where you eat kind of thing. And so I think that plays a big role in defining, especially for children, bringing them up to say, hey, this is what community is and this is how it works. If you're sitting here talking about a more digital, less physically, socially connected community, you have a lot smaller pool that you're really choosing from. You can quietly judge behind your keyboard and behind your screen. Oh, we're not ever doing that. We don't want to be like those people. Versus if that was your neighbor, it's a lot harder to ignore, I feel like. One of the things that I thought was interesting was, again, kind of leaning into the history. Cole, you're going to have to say his name.
Alexis de Tocqueville?
Thank you. So, Alexis de Tocqueville observed in the 1830s that Americans formed voluntary associations to solve problems collectively, long before the state stepped in. And I did a little bit of research on him specifically. He was a French diplomat from the early 1800s, early to mid 1800s, a French diplomat, a political philosopher, and a historian, but he's best known for his works, Democracy in America and The Old Regime and the Revolution. In both, he analyzed the living standards and social conditions of individuals as well as their relationship to the market and state in Western societies. So this is kind of community was a big part of what he's researching and looking into.
Does this seem odd that a Frenchman was reviewing the American way of life?
No.
It doesn't to me, but Mom, I think that you and I were having a conversation. We have had a conversation on and off. Like, I would be so curious to talk to people in other countries about, we were talking specifically about Christianity. Like, what does that look like to you? How does that play out in your home country, in your native tongue? Like, what does that mean? What are those kind of defining factors?
Does it look different?
Have we Americanized Christianity? Have we bastardized Christianity in America because we're this? And so I think that having an outsider's perspective, especially on something like the culture of Americans, would be really helpful and telling. Maybe not all encompassing of the entirety of it, but telling still. And then
Another tangent here, but I don't think the bastardization of Christianity is inherently American. I think that is inherently human.
And that's why I want to ask people in other countries.
Yeah.
Because I'm so curious as to if they're as apt to beat people over the head with Jesus. Because I don't know. I'm just curious.
In modern society, no. But again, you're talking about different communities that have been impacted by this input at a different time in their cultural development, if you will. But I mean, you had the Spanish Inquisitions. That's pretty beating people over the head with it.
Yeah. And that's kind of my point is this all coming to a head? Is this all different across the globe? How does it manifest? What does it look like? And where is everybody in that kind of lineup of on the spectrum of goodness and love and kindness and grace versus judgment?
Different community.
Different communities.
Yeah, different communities, different inputs at the time. I
Mhm.
mean, I think the pretty widely accepted theory is that every individual is shaped partially by kind of just their inherent nature, but that inherent nature is shaped by nurture, by the stimuli that are input into their experience. There are pieces of my personality that would not exist if I had not had some of the experiences that I have. And the same goes for everyone. And I would imagine because communities are built of individuals, the same could be said for communities.
I don't think that I disagree with any of that, but I think that it's a fascinating, interesting kind of road to walk down. Which is
Questions we want to
okay.
ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
mm,
I can say this. If I have a regret about you guys at all, it's that you did not grow up with an exposure to that farming community that I was a part of, because I think that community had such a basis in, well, reality and to some degree, but the way that they lived, because, they weren't getting a paycheck every couple of weeks. They were getting a paycheck after the crop season. So they were frugal in ways, and maybe part of that is because they'd come through World War II. I mean, I'm sure that was a factor in there, but there's just a different mentality in my head of someone who grew up in that agricultural community than what you guys have been exposed to. And in my head, that is, they're more solid. They're just, maybe it's that they're closer to the land. Maybe it's that, they're working with Mother Nature and relying on, what happens there. But I do think it's a different mentality. And so I regret that y'all have not had that exposure, because I think y'all have had an exposure more to the industrial side of life, or really the technological part of life. And it's totally different.
so what specifically do you wish that we had gotten out of that?
I think that exposure to that type of living.
But more specifically, what are you talking? Do you wish that we were gardeners? Do you wish that we were working with the land? Like, what is it that you're trying to take away?
I think an exposure to the land, yes, an exposure to nature, however that might come about.
The part that is so funny to me in that is I feel like Cole, and you can chime in at any point, but I feel like we definitely grew up with an exposure to nature, much more so than a lot of our peers. And I think that even now, today, you can see the impacts of that. Was it different than what you experienced? Sure, absolutely. But I hate to break it to you, what you experienced and took away from it, from your specific experience, that lived experience is still different than what your sister took away and experienced.
Sure.
And so that's why I was curious as to what it was that you felt like we were missing, because I do think that it's there. I think that it looks different.
I would agree.
I don't disagree with you. I think the quantity was different,
I think
or
that
maybe the quality.
the necessity was different.
That could be it too.
This was how your grandparents survived and made a
Mhm.
living. Cole has done jobs where he worked outside and has done all of that. And he was great at them. But he also said, I want to do something different. and had an opportunity to change, and the necessity wasn't the same. And so I think that the necessity is the part that's different in that. And I think that the necessity has changed it and shifted. I mean, to kind of pull us back on track, has shifted based on the community around us here. Hey, if we all had to, I mean, Cole and Dad and I have read all of these books about an EMP has hit or the world has ended and all of these people in America are trying to survive and live. I don't think that any of the three of us would sit here and go, I am way too good to go start a garden and start farming and go slaughter a cow. Do I want to do those things? Not necessarily. And I am very lucky in that I don't have to do those things today, but I could, but the necessity is different.
And maybe that's part of what I see is that I grew up watching them utilize everything that they had.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of waste in their life. I mean, they lived relatively frugally. They relied, like I said, on Mother Nature. And they just, I mean, you guys live in a disposable society. They didn't have disposable. They
Yeah,
used everything.
but again, I'm kind of with Callie on this one. The necessity is wildly different. Like I'm like I can build a computer. I've built a modern rifle. I am pretty technologically savvy, but I can also build a lean-to. I can also gut a deer and catch fish.
Yeah.
Like I've got the exposure to that. Now, is it something that I use in my everyday life? No, but again, my necessities right now are very different.
Right.
And so,
well, and I think our community is very different. We are not living off of the grid. We are not living with no access to a grocery store 5 miles down the road, and we don't have to. And I think some of that, especially here in the next several years, we're going to see and realize how detrimental those things are.
That access?
Yeah. I mean, going back to Wall-E, I think is another kind of tying example for this specific topic. Like everything's disposable. I can just buy another one. Well, that waste has to go somewhere. And we're generating more waste today than we have ever in the history of recorded history. And so I think that we're going to see the lingering impacts of that. I think that in some ways, Cole and I, even just being so adjacent to our great-grandparents and to people who have lived that lifestyle, I think that we look at things a little bit differently than some other people do because of that. I am really weird about expiration dates. If it does not smell weird, if it's not a weird color and it's not hairy, I'm eating it.
Same.
Because I don't want to throw it away. I don't want to waste it. I have been known, and this is horrible, I've got some strawberries that are in the refrigerator that are hairy, and I feel guilty that I did not eat them fast enough, that I did not use them to nourish my body. And I feel bad, so I don't throw them away. They just sit there and grow hair in the refrigerator. And it's like, Callie, this is gross. And because I feel guilty about it. But I think that, again, our communities are so much less prevalent in our lives. If my mom was coming over and needed a snack, I'm going to throw those strawberries away because I don't want her to sit here and see my hairy strawberries. But we have so much more distance, physical and otherwise, that is between us and our communities.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that we were talking again about the norm enforcement, the acceptable behavior, what isn't acceptable, and how that all kind of works and is valued. It's still there. There's just a bigger gap, I feel like.
Yes, I agree.
And I think that, kind of switching gears a little bit, I think that your grandparents they lived where they lived and they relied upon the people who were around them because they had to, where Cole and I, and even you to some extent, we have an option to do differently. I can create my community with people who live all around the world. They have the same and shared interest as I do, so we can create our own community even if we don't live next door to each other.
Well, and I think that leads us into a great description, a place where we can define what community is, because I think you can have different kinds of community, and they're going to look different and sound different. But I mean, if you're talking about a community that's based all around the world, then that community is focused on probably one thing, and you can't expect that community to show up on your doorstep because, you know, you've got the flu and you can't get up and go to the grocery store on your own. But there's another community that could be, I mean, Callie, you have a great community in this neighborhood where people know you and recognize you. And I mean, your neighbor feeds you, I think, more than you feed yourself sometimes. And so that's a different kind of community that you know that you could call that neighbor and they would show up for you
But I
in a
think that
heartbeat.
I totally agree. And I have an absolutely fantastic community and neighborhood of people. But I think that you're kind of selling short the technology that is in place, because Cole has talked about, Cole, what did you say here a while back in a different episode? When you go and slay a dragon with somebody, you become closer with them. And so Cole may, like, it wouldn't at all surprise me for Cole, somebody to reach out to Cole digitally and say, hey, Cole, let's go slay another dragon. Let's go do this. And Cole's like, hey, I've got the flu. I can't. And them say, well, I'm going to hop on Uber Eats in your area and send you some chicken noodle soup because I'm in Vancouver.
But let me ask you this question. Is getting that chicken noodle soup from Uber Eats different than getting that chicken soup from your neighbor?
No, it's the thought that
Really?
counts.
Yeah, I mean, is the quality of chicken noodle soup maybe different? Sure, but that could go either way. It could be better
Yeah,
or worse. But
Yeah.
still, there's somebody in Vancouver who's sending me chicken noodle soup.
it's the
I mean,
thought
that's
that
just a
counts.
kind gesture in general.
Well,
Yeah.
And so again, I kind of want to go back to something here because I'm a little concerned that you
Discount,
not discount,
kind
but
of discount.
no, because I'm not that's not the angle that I'm approaching it from.
Oh.
And maybe from a different angle that's the right phrase, but it almost seems like, and maybe regret is too strong a word, regret that Callie and I didn't have that same kind of exposure to the community that you mentioned earlier. But had we, that means we're not getting exposure to other things, to other types of communities that may have led to our ability to be successful in a modern society.
I see what you're saying. I just think that there is a basis, let's call it your foundation. There's a foundation that I think you grow up with, and that's where I regret that I'm not sure y'all got that foundation, which I feel was more solid than what we have today.
I'm going to ask again
I think we
here.
got it though.
A
Oh,
foundation
good.
of what? Kindness, helpfulness, showing up.
All of that, being real. Um,
I have that today, though. You just specifically stated that in my neighborhood, I have that.
it's just a different kind.
I think that it is different, but I think that that's part of the difference of our generation versus yours. We
Yeah.
have given ourselves the freedom to curate our communities
To
rather
choose.
than, rather than just taking what we get.
Yeah. I agree with that.
It doesn't have to be so specific based on your geography or the institutions in which you're a part of.
Yeah.
The internet has given us an opportunity to look at it differently, to address it differently. And I don't think there's anything bad about that. I do. I think it's different. When is the last time one of your neighbors fed you?
Well, technically, one of my neighbors is feeding my husband tonight.
That's true. That is true. But it's just different.
Yeah, it is. And again, I want to stress that community is not one thing. It can be multiple things. And I don't think any of us live, and maybe that's part of the difference. Maybe my grandparents lived in more like one community and not, I mean, we have this infinite number of opportunities for community today because of the internet, because of social media. And we've talked about this lots of times about it's almost like you've got too many options. And so maybe that's the difference. But community, I don't feel like I sit in one community like I feel like they did. I feel like I have multiple communities. That
I
may
get that.
be, I've worked with the same group of people for over 20 years. That was a community. And would they show up with chicken noodle soup? Yeah. And they'd be bossing me around about, what kind of health care I should be getting or which doctor I should be seeing. Yes, that's true too. I mean, and then when we were a part of a significant part of a church, that was a community too. It was just a different kind of community. So, I mean, they're different.
I think that is what I am finding looking into kind of community, the history of, is that there are more options today than there have ever been before. But I
Yeah.
think that you could say that about damn near anything. There are more options for strawberry jams and jellies today than have ever been on the shelves in history. I mean,
True.
I think that it's just, there are so many more things available for you to choose, choices to be made, that you can, again, curate whatever it is that you want out of it. And I think that maybe this is what you're saying, and you can tell me I'm totally wrong. I think that because we have so many choices, there are a couple of negatives within that. Number one, I think you've got the analysis paralysis that, well, I don't know what to choose, so I'm just not going to choose anything. I just don't know, so I'm just not going to choose. Whereas if you were in a small farming community in the 1950s, you didn't have a choice to say, I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
Somebody's going to say, well, this is what you're getting, so get to work.
Or, Callie, you can have so many going on that you're not really a part
Yeah.
of anything.
Yeah. A shallow depth of knowledge in some, but no
Yes.
serious depth in any.
Yeah. And maybe it is that depth that I'm thinking about and looking at, because if you go back to your group when you were talking about having a group internationally, it all depends on how that group is built and what that is. I mean, if that's just you guys looking at each other on Facebook because you're, in a group on Facebook, that's not much community. But if y'all are interacting with each other on a regular basis and you know each other, that's a different kind of community.
But I mean, just like any kind of community, that has to be developed over time. If you take 50 families and drop them out in a remote location, they're not all going to get along right off the bat. But over time, they're going to develop a community. And regardless of proximity, now you can do that.
If you want to, yeah.
Do you think that if you want to, has always been the case, or is that new in the last several decades?
Degrees of separation, I think here. Like, lots of people were hermits.
Yeah,
Who
I was
didn't
going to
have a
say,
community,
I don't
who
think
went and lived
that's
by
new.
themselves out in the mountains.
Yeah.
So it's not a new concept.
Right.
It's just expressed differently.
So we have talked about kind of, again, the difference of an embedded community versus a chosen community and what that all looks like. But I think that there are a couple of structural shifts that take place in that curation versus embedded. And I think that this is kind of along the same lines of what you're feeling like Cole and I missed out on, but the industrialization versus urbanization of anything and everything. This is what I have. I mean, you and I watched a movie earlier this week where one of the characters goes, "We're just going to MacGyver it." Like, Gen Z doesn't know what that means. They don't know who MacGyver is.
That's funny.
But they do, I would say, in various regards, know how to MacGyver something and get by because that's what they have to do.
They're not going to MacGyver it. They're going to Google it. Google's going to give them an answer of some kind.
I still think
Yeah, but they still solve the problem.
Yeah. I still
I mean,
count.
you're right.
If I get from A to B with a rubber band and a piece of duct tape, or I get there with a hair tie and electrical tape, the end result is I still got from A to B.
Yeah.
One's not necessarily better than the other. It's just different.
Just different. Yeah. We talked about kind of the geographic realm of all of this. Like, because of the injection of the internet, you've got so much more reach. You can get online and find somebody who understands and believes and feels the same way you do about X on just about any.
Isn't that what Reddit's completely and totally built on? Wouldn't you call those communities in some ways when you're...
Yeah.
Oftentimes, yes.
Yeah.
I think by and large, they're much less personal communities.
Yes.
But not in every instance.
Agreed.
I mean, might be, could be, but some of those are pretty vulnerable
a Reddit
communities.
Forum with 100,000 people in it is much different than a party of 4 who goes and slays dragons together on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
It's just different.
So Reddit's current tagline or slogan is the heart of the internet.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because
would y'all
again,
agree with that?
I think that it's the pulse. Like it or not, it's still where
the veins
happens.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the pump, but it's probably the pipes.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not as cute of a tagline. The pipes of the internet. I'll take it over the Reddit.
Okay. But those things have changed it, do change it, do affect the kind of community that it is.
Well, and I think that, like we were talking about, the analysis paralysis and so many more options, I think that that choice can increase your freedom in some regards. Hey, I have the option to be exactly who I am and that be acceptable within this community because I can go and find them. But I think that it also, in some ways, by some measures, reduces your obligation. I don't have to go and pick those crops because I don't want to.
Yeah.
I can just go to the store. Like, the obligation factor changes the more choices that you have.
Yeah. I mean, you have to hold yourself accountable in those scenarios. And I think, I certainly think that that's something that, at least in Western society, we have largely moved away from. But you can make the decision, I am going to be a part of this community and do what I can to help the other individuals within it. Not everybody makes that decision, but anybody can.
I'm sitting here thinking, I'm back at Reddit, and I'm sitting here thinking, when you're in and I'm going to call it a Reddit community, and assuming that y'all can go there with me, but when you're in that community, you don't know who those other people are. You simply have their words and their tagline, their username.
Sometimes.
But you don't really know much about those individuals, where they're located, where they come from.
It could say the same thing for you about the people at the grocery store.
Yeah.
You're much more physically closer to them, but you don't know anything about those people until you do.
But I'm not in a community with the people in the grocery store.
Sure you are.
Yeah.
Of course you are. You live in the same town as them, as a town, not a community.
But I don't think that that's even true. Mom, you were in a grocery store last night talking about your home community to my community here. And she didn't think twice about it. And she didn't say, oh, where are you from? We were talking about Chicago, the community of Chicago, and how cold it was and all of this. But it was also very obvious that this is not your community. But nobody turned you away.
And that isn't even what I'm saying. But if I'm walking into the grocery store, I'm not relying on those people. I'm not building a relationship with those people. I'm going to go get food and I'm going to pay for it. That's the goal there.
What about the little old lady that I walk by and she says, "Excuse me, young man, could you reach that jar for me on the top shelf?"
Is
And not
that
like that's some
community?
giant Of course it is.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it falls, that specific thing, that specific example of some little old lady asking Cole to reach something on the shelf is the definition of community, because all of a sudden it's about how his parents raised him. He could say, hell no, I'm not doing that for you. He's not going to, because that's not how he was raised by his community.
no, his community would bop him on the nose for that.
Yeah. But I think that your definition of community is much stricter, much tighter
Obviously.
than ours. I think that in general, our definition of community is much more wide reaching. And I think that that is because of the internet, because of the availability of information and other people and other choices and ideas, the freedoms that those choices have afforded us. I think that that's why our definition of community is much more broad.
And here's, I want to try and give this example. The woman who asked me to reach for something off of the top shelf is just as much a part of a community as someone in some subreddit somewhere who says, "Hey, I don't know how to do XYZ. Can somebody explain it to me? Can somebody teach me how to do this? Can somebody share a link to a resource?" It's the exact same thing.
I have been sitting in a room. I posted a thread on Reddit. I posted a question and I wanted responses in a very specific subset of Reddit. And I wanted responses. I've been sitting in a room and somebody in that room has found it and turned and looked at me and was like, "Is that you?" Yeah, it is. It's happened because our communities, I mean, think of it like a Venn diagram. In that moment, they overlapped. That's not normally what I'm talking about or where I'm at on Reddit, but I needed this answer for this specific question. And so all of a sudden, I got people in my real life community involved totally by happenstance.
So, do you define community as any interaction?
Not necessarily any interaction, but anyone can be a part of a community because we have literally removed the limitation of physical proximity.
Yes.
Isn't that a choice, though? Doesn't that make it a choice to be a part of that community?
Every community is a choice. Just because I live in a town, I can be a grouch and be rude to everyone around me and not participate. Every being a part of any community is a choice.
So I asked, just really quick, I asked ChatGPT how we as a podcast would define community. And this is what it says. It's a working definition shaped by tension, first and foremost. Tension, experience, and negotiation. But here's what it says. Community is a group of people bound by shared responsibility over time, where belonging is earned through showing up, not just agreeing, and where care, accountability, and continuity matter as much as choice.
And see, I don't see the old lady asking Cole to reach for the jar of pickles on the top shelf as meeting that definition.
Because, and here's what it says, Mecca would bring in the long view. For her, community is continuity. It's the people who know your whole story, not just your current chapter. It's built through repetition, obligation, forgiveness, and time. Community isn't always comfortable, but it is reliable.
But I mean, that's such a rigid definition
Yeah.
it can't ever change. It can't
Yeah.
evolve. It can't grow. It just is.
Cole would frame community as a system, not a sentiment. For him, community is about durability, incentives, and trade-offs. Who does what when things go wrong? Who carries the cost? What happens when disagreement shows up? A real community survives misalignment because it has structure, not just shared vibes. He
I
would
would say that's
probably
fairly
argue that the
accurate.
problem today isn't that people don't want community, it's that we've optimized it for exit. When leaving is frictionless, commitment becomes fragile. Community, in his view, is what happens when people accept limits on their autonomy in exchange for stability and mutual support.
And it does fit that
Sounds pretty
definition.
reasonable.
And then it says, Callie would push back against the idea that community is automatic or inherited. For her, community is intentional and values driven. It is not just proximity. It's alignment around care, respect, and growth. Community should be a place where people are allowed to evolve without being frozen in who they used to be, and where accountability is a form of care, not punishment.
Okay. I feel like I've been schooled.
By ChatGPT, not us. We didn't do it.
I think it might have been y'all too.
Goodness. So in Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, he documents the decline of civic participation and social capital as communities became thinner and more optional, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I
What do you
think that I almost feel like civic participation is up, because everybody's screaming at each other all the time. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong.
I don't know that that's participation though, Boo.
I don't know that that's civic participation. And I also think, and Dad used to say this, it's not that everybody's yelling, it's that the people who are yelling really loud.
Well, I think
And
that's
so
a good point.
are there people that are out there complaining you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong? Yes, absolutely there are. Am I in that camp on occasion? Probably, sure. But I think that we have to remind ourselves that the people who are yelling really loud and not necessarily yelling what all of the rest of us want, what we believe.
I think that's fair.
Is it fair to say that those people who are yelling might not be in your community?
Yeah. And again, I'm looking at it like a Venn diagram. We may not overlap in every single facet and sector, but I'm sure that there are points that we do. I don't relate to lots of things about somebody who would consider themselves MAGA, but they still like to eat hamburgers, and I make a pretty mean one. And I would be glad to feed them as long as they're not going to be assholes. I'm also really curious as to what you guys think about your definition specifically of community and how it changes or doesn't throughout the course of time, throughout the course of one's life.
I definitely think it changes. I mean, you stop and you think about who you knew or who you hung out with in junior high and high school.
Mhm.
You know, were you in the band? Were you in the drill team? Were you the jock? Were you the
Quiet kid in the corner.
quiet kid in the corner, the nerd? And then you get out of high school and you go to college and you get this exposure to all kinds of different things and different people. And those previous communities affect you, but they don't necessarily define you anymore. Maybe you're not in the band anymore.
I think you become more selective of the communities that you participate in as you get older.
I think
And I think part of that is resource strain. Like, I don't
Yeah.
have the resources to participate in every single community. So I am going to decide which ones to prioritize.
I think sometimes those come about organically, not necessarily by a conscious decision. I mean, I think of my roommates in college and how, I mean, we banded together for those years and hung for those years because we were, doing the same thing. Our exposure was the same. We were all trying to make it through, classes and get a degree. And then
Yeah, but you also had to share a room together.
true, which is where the bonding came. But then, as this one got married or that one got married or this one started a family, those bonds changed, or they moved to someplace that I didn't move to, or I moved someplace different, and those bonds changed. So I definitely think, it's even the same thing. I have four other women that I grew up with from elementary school, but we're in different phases of life. A couple of us are divorced, a couple of us have young children, a couple of us have older children, but there's still a bond there that we shared that I would call community. And I guess I go back to that Venn diagram. There's a connection there, but we're not identical anymore. Those have changed. Our circumstances have changed and become different.
So I did a little thing where I kind of mapped out some of the community concepts, if you will, throughout a life cycle.
Okay.
And I want to read these to you guys and kind of get your take on them, because I think that several of the things that both of you are saying are very well represented in this. So early adulthood, think 20 and younger. Community often functions as a space for identity formation and experimentation. Mom, when you listed off all of these groups that you could have been a part of in middle school, high school, you could be in band, you could be in drill team, you could be doing this, you could be the nerd in the corner, whatever that may be. I think that very much speaks to you're trying to figure out who you are. Do I want to be a band nerd? And I'm trying to think, and maybe you guys could help me. I'm trying to think of like any example, not just in my life directly, but any example of somebody who was categorized in junior high or high school as a band nerd. Are they still a band nerd when they're 40?
I think
Are they
that
still in
depends.
band?
I think it does depend, but I think that they have really, no matter who they are, they've lived a more well-rounded life. That band thread has ebbed and flowed throughout the course of time. They're not always getting up for marching band practice at 6 a.m. every Monday through Friday. They're not going and performing on Friday nights at football games every single week during football season. It looks different. Now they're also opening themselves up to other ideas and other communities. So again, it's just one little piece of their Venn diagram of who they are in the community in which they belong. Even if, you talked about my neighbors. I've got a neighbor here who still plays the trombone. And he's a grown man with grown kids, and it's something that he still goes out and performs and does all of these things. And it's cool, but you don't look at him and say, what a nerd,
Band
what
nerd.
a band nerd. Because there's so much more to him than that.
I think you're right about the identity formation and what we're looking for and who we're trying to be, what we're trying to grow into, which is normal.
Yeah. I think that especially as young adults, you have larger, more fluid groups. We're all figuring this out together. We'll see how it goes. I think that it's built around those interests, those ideals, and even those values. This is important to me. I'm going to pull Charlie Kirk up here for a second. I think that you had a bunch of college students who were like, look, I am desperate for some kind of healthy debate and interesting conversation. I'm going to go to this turning point being on my campus day, and I want to go and have a conversation with him and see if I can stump him, whether you agree with him or not. Because you're looking for people who are similar to you, even if the actual belief itself is different. Charlie Kirk, you can't say didn't have an interest in debate. So even if you disagreed on the specific topic, there's still a shared interest on the discussion of that I think is defining, especially at that age.
Absolutely.
I think that you also have a high tolerance for instability. everything can change in an instant. Oh, I'm going to high school now, so I have different people than I had in middle school. Oh, I'm going to college, so now I'm 300 miles away, 3,000 miles away for college. I have now decided I want to be this kind of person when I grow up, so I have to have a focus on that. And all of my other friends went off to do different things that were more well suited for them. And so I think that instability I think it's really good for us. I think it's really, really good for us. I think, we talked about in the Lost Boys episode that willingness to fail, willingness to be okay with failing and getting back up and saying, hey, I'm going to go be an accountant. Holy shit, I hate calculators. Like, okay, cool. But you have to be able to pick back up and stand back up and say, okay, I'm not going to be an accountant anymore. I'm going to go be a game warden, whatever that may be. You have that opportunity. Yes, you have much more flexibility in the communities that you're kind of privy to at a young age.
Okay.
Then more midlife, that community shifts from identity to coordination. Are much more like time has become much more scarce. You've got all of these things going on. You're trying to figure out what to do, how to get the kids where, who's doing this. I've got to go to work and make my money so that I can pay all of my bills. My parents' health is failing. I need to go figure out how to take care of them. Those responsibilities multiply. And I think that the relatability becomes more important than alignment. Oh, she understands what it is like having a couple of kids and a parent with dementia. I appreciate that she understands where I'm coming from. I don't have to catch her up to speed because she already knows whatever that looks like. And so I think that is a little bit different in your midlife. You're looking for people, you're looking for the overlaps in your Venn diagrams. And I mean,
commonalities.
Yeah. And I think some of those things, especially in midlife, some of those sections, the commonalities, the sections of the Venn diagram are served to you, not chosen. Who wants to be in a, hey, my parents have dementia support group kind of thing?
Yeah.
Who wants to have a parent with dementia? But you kind of have to be because that's what life has served you. And so I think that relatability is really important. And then we're talking about the structural tension in that same kind of time period. Communities often fail not from conflict, but neglect. I'm so busy doing this, I didn't have time to go make dinner to take to my friend. I'm so busy paying attention over here that I wasn't asking how their day was and what's going on in their life and what do they need help with. And so midlife is a little bit more frantic, I feel like.
Yeah. I don't have time to play that trombone anymore.
Right. And then later in life, the community comes about continuity, care, and interdependence. Smaller, deeper networks. We've already determined, hey, we're in the same boat on this, this, and this. We know what it is. But health and loss raises the stakes a lot. My friend that I was so related to and so valued died. And that's hard. And I think that's different. And so I think that dependence on other members of your community increases through especially hard times. Gosh, I really need somebody here because I am going through it and I feel really alone.
I think there's a lot of things that can be a factor there. Your health, your abilities. I mean, even the change in life. If we look at your dad's retirement, that changed his community. I mean, he'd been in that industry for nearly 50 years, and all of a sudden that industry isn't pertinent to him anymore. So those things do affect your community and maybe change it.
Yeah.
And I think that in response to that, he's grown tighter in another community.
Sure. I mean, but can you imagine if Dad was the first of his friends to retire and he didn't have anybody to call while he's sitting there all day by himself?
Who would go fishing?
Who would go fishing? So, I don't know. I think that community can't have such a strict definition, that it has to be a little bit more open-ended, because I do believe that it ebbs and flows throughout the course of your life cycle.
So you have an interesting discussion question here of, are we building communities that only work when people are young and productive?
Well, I mean, In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. I mean, look, here's the thing. The community that was around Dad before he retired, they don't necessarily care about him any less now.
They just don't
But
have exposure to him.
right. And so that community is not as strong. He is not as much a part of that community anymore. Now,
Yeah.
would some of those people come help him if he called? Sure. Would all of them?
Absolutely.
No. But
Yeah.
the same is true for the communities that I was a part of when I was 20 years old. But there, again, I think there are certainly communities within communities that
Mhm.
are tighter than the broader community itself. And so I think that parts of this are true, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. I don't think you can really generalize it across all communities.
It's not concrete. Yeah, I
Right.
agree. I think it is a variance of all of those. I mean, I still have a community, even though I don't work with the same people that I worked with for so many years, but there are a group of them that I'm still ultra close to and that we do communicate. So I don't think it's just when we're young and productive.
I don't think that it's just when we're young and productive. I do think that if when you're young and productive, you make building community a priority and maintaining that, it can serve you well. I mean, Mom, you're talking about your Fab Five, the five of you who were friends from elementary school. I don't speak to a soul from elementary school or middle school or high school. I just don't. That wasn't, for some odd reason, and I have no idea, but that wasn't a priority for me.
Well, you've had access to so many more communities
That were
than
better
Mom did
suited
at
to
that
me.
time.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree
right.
with that.
And I think that that kind of is a really good natural lead in into my next section here about the generational differences as to how we all look at community. I think that different generations didn't just choose different communities, they lived under different constraints. I think that, I mean, Mom, you're talking about your grandparents, and when he had a heart attack, all of these other people coming to help. That was a very clear definition of or example of having a high obligation and a low exit rate, because we got to do this so that in case this happens to me, somebody's going to do it for me because he's my neighbor and we share a fence line, whatever that may be. I think that the stability at the cost of autonomy was thrown out the window in many of your situations, in many of your communities, because you wanted that stability. You needed that. That was so important to you. And then again, and we've kind of talked about it here and there on other occasions, but millennials specifically, we don't know anything about stability. We have lived in the most tumultuous timeline of all of this chaos at all of these very inopportune moments and times in our lives that has shaped the way that we address life, much less our community. I think that younger generations, especially think like Gen Z or Gen Alpha, have a much higher exit rate and a much lower obligation. Well, you didn't help me slay that dragon the way that I wanted you to, so we're not slaying dragons together anymore. And there are so many more options for them to go find somebody else to slay dragons with.
I started to say, I think they have so many avenues, different avenues that, and this would be my concern, that they're not building lasting communities. They are exiting when they're disgruntled with that and are, so
I think that's true for some people, but I don't think that's anything new. I don't think that's a new concept. Maybe it's a slightly more prevalent.
I think it's more prevalent for them because I think they don't have that, they're not living with face-to-face relationships as much as earlier generations did.
I still think that that's a really narrow definition of what makes community, is that you have to be face to face.
Yeah, I also just don't think it's that true. Just because you have more exposure to people that aren't face to face doesn't mean you're getting less exposure to face interaction. In some cases, is that true? Sure, but how many people still go to an office and work? They have to be around those people face to face all day, every day.
Well, and again, I think that it looks different on that timeline of where you are in life. So we can sit here and judge Gen Z right now based on what their community looks like to us as outsiders with no perspective, but that may not be what their community looks like when they're 35.
True.
That may not be what their community or even their definition of community looks like when they're 60. And so I
I'd be
think that
very
it's,
curious to see what their communities do look like when they're
yeah.
60.
I think that New York City is such a good example of this. You always hear people talk about, like, you don't know your neighbors in New York and nobody knows anybody in New York. But then you sit there and anybody who lives in New York will tell you that New York City is a small town. You're always running into somebody. I mean, I'm thinking about Sex and the City episodes, which, yes, I know is fictional TV, but still the sentiment is the same. They're walking down the street and running into that old boyfriend. And of course, it happened in the day when they look like garbage and they didn't want to see them, whatever. I mean, but then you had COVID where all of these people who didn't know each other all came together, or 9/11. All of these people who didn't know each other came together and said, hey, we want to celebrate this. We want to band around this. We want to do this together. And so their community looks different than mine. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different.
I guess, okay, so let me take one of your examples. If you talk about 9/11, and I think that the entire nation came together over that and tightened that community, but I don't see that today.
I would agree with you.
So you just maybe grew out of that community or it didn't serve you anymore. Could be that too.
But I also think you're sitting here talking about the United States coming together as a whole, which I totally agree with you. But nobody experienced it more peripherally than New Yorkers at that time, than people who worked at the Pentagon when that plane hit, that people who had family members on United 93 when it crashed in that field. Nobody felt that community more strongly than those people who were directly impacted. I mean, somebody out in Southern California who saw it on the news and were rocked by it weren't rocked the same way that somebody who lost their dad was.
Agree.
And so again, I just think that it's different. I mean, and you can still talk to New Yorkers now who were my age when September 11th hit, who were in middle school when September 11th happened, that they still have a very specific definition of New Yorkers get shit done. We come together, we show up for each other because that's what you do. Because that's what we had to do when they had all of these blackouts and when they had all of these different things that have come on, that they show up, and they kind of all do because they have to. And so I think that their mentality, I don't want to say it's like a forced community, but it kind of is. We live here and we know that this is what it's going to look like because that's what it has historically always looked like. And so we got to hold up our end of this bargain and we got to show up too. And I think that that looks different for every community. But I don't know. I think that we have, in general, so Cole, Mom, and I have started watching the newsroom. I think that we have really turned away from actual truth and the spirit of disagreement into my truth.
So it's
And
like everything's true now.
everything's true now because that's how I feel and that's what I want. So it has to be true and you can't take that away from me. And so I think that I'm really curious to see how all of this plays out. They're sitting here talking about it in that show. We are not here to sensationalize everything. We are here to report the news. And
The
you're right.
facts.
It may not get as many hits or clicks or views as making a big scene about something because that's what everybody is talking about, but it is the truth, and the truth wins. And so I think that when you're sitting here talking about community, especially with younger generations, the fragility that has taken place because disagreement is so uncomfortable, so frowned upon, I think is an important note here.
I would agree.
So then when you start taking into consideration everything that goes into building a community, think that how people define community is different and nuanced and specific to each of those people, because community is still a relationship and relationships take work, right? So even if that is, hey, tall man at the grocery store, can you grab this off the top shelf? That means that Cole has to stop what he's doing, go grab this for you and hand it to you. Maybe he's on the phone, maybe he's in a hurry. It doesn't matter. He has to stop what he's doing to come and participate. And so I think that we need to take into consideration the costs of the requirements of community. And I think time is one of them. I think emotional regulation is part of it. We can't just sit here and be pissy because she asked me to take something off the top shelf and I don't want to do it right now. I mean, you've got to sit here and regulate all of those emotions and be reasonable within yourself before you can do it with somebody else, right? I think that we've got to take into consideration how we manage conflict. I don't like the way that Cole slayed that dragon with me, so I'm just not going to ever slay dragons again with him. Hold on, maybe we can step back and say, Cole, this was important to me in slaying that dragon. Is there a way that we can find some compromise here? Because maybe that was important to you in the way that we slayed the dragon. And so having those conversations and having that opportunity to manage that conflict, I think are important. I think that the work that goes into caring for another person and prioritizing that care for another person, even if it's some stranger at the grocery store, there are lots of ways that Cole can accomplish that task of handing her something off of the top shelf. And of those ways, there are some that are good and kind, and there are some that are really shitty.
I just think it comes down to if you are participating in a community that there are trade-offs there. You can't do that alone. You have to do that in conjunction with somebody, and there has to be a like thought there in some degree. I mean, if you go back to the old lady asking Cole, it could be the old lady asking somebody who says, hell no, I'm not getting that for you. I don't have time for you.
Yeah.
I mean, and so
Right, but
that
that's
affects
not
it.
a person participating in the community. And so I think I don't think you can expect to garner the advantages of community without putting in the effort yourself to participate. Because
I agree with that.
if I walk by that little old lady and say, hell no, I'm not going to get that from the shelf, and then go ask somebody else to do something for me, well, what if the little old lady is their grandma? And they're going to say, no, why would I help you? You wouldn't even help this lady reach the top shelf.
I just think, I mean, despite what we each consider to be community, there's cost involved. You don't get out of it. I mean, or I guess you do get out of it what you put into it is a better way of saying that, and what your involvement is going to be.
Well, and I think that we have to remember that community has to be a two-way street. It can't just be always giving or always taking. That doesn't work.
I think that's a really valid point. It is participation in some way. Even with your international one, it's participation in one way. If you're going to have interaction, but you're just going to sit out and not include your thoughts or your interaction, then you're not really participating in that community.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think that we're sitting in the middle of what many, many psychologists, sociologists would classify as a loneliness epidemic. And I think that if community was more a priority that loneliness epidemic would look different. Those people wouldn't be as lonely. They wouldn't be kind of on the outskirts by themselves. They could be welcomed in to whatever community it is that is important to them.
So let me ask you this. Are we lonely because we've decided that we don't want to be part of community, or that I'm thinking about these guys who, are struggling to find a woman to date. Is that self-imposed exclusion, or is that really a valid point that they've already been excluded from that community? Are we putting our own limits on what we can participate in?
I think to some extent, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly has potential to be both here. Like, look, if I'm willing to put in the effort and you're not, what the hell do I want to do? Why would I want to be in a relationship with you? And that goes for every kind of relationship. If I am constantly sending messages in a Facebook group that I'm on and no one is ever responding, well, I'm going to stop sending messages to that Facebook group. It's very straightforward from this particular perspective for me. And so I think that societally we have directed our attention towards selfishness. I need to collect. I need to gather. I need to do all of this stuff for me, and no one else that is not me is important in that. I am the ultimate, not each of us is cumulatively the ultimate, even though we need a certain amount of individualism. Just because I am me doesn't make me more important than you.
Yes, but what I'm saying is then that means that you're making a choice, and maybe it's not a conscious choice, but you're making a choice not to join a community, not to be a part of a community. And so I guess in my mind, what I'm saying is I think these younger generations are struggling, and some of it is self-imposed.
Sure. But a lot of it is because they are prioritizing just themselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you are prioritizing just yourself, nobody is going to want to be in a community with you because there is no advantage to having you in their community.
And what that does is make for really weak or non-existent communities. And so we have to have belonging in some kind.
Does it make for weak communities, or does it make for weak people?
Yes. I think it's both. I think
you have weak people because they do not have a community to help prop them up when they are not strong.
Right.
And they aren't part of those communities because they are not willing to put in the effort to be part of that community.
It goes back to Chris's saying, you get out of it what you put into it. If you're not willing to participate, you're not willing to communicate, you're not willing to listen, you're not willing to grab the stuff off the top shelf, or you're not willing to send the chicken noodle soup, why would anybody do any of those things for you? And then you want to sit here and claim loneliness when you brought it on yourself.
Right.
I don't think that's a flaw of the community. I think that's a personal flaw in you.
But it weakens the community.
Well, I think it just removes the possibility for it to become a community. But I think a lot of that doesn't necessarily come from individual shortfalls. I think that it comes from demonizing other communities. You can't talk to that person in this other community because they think differently than you. That guy eats animals. He's a bad person. You can never be a part of any community that he's involved in. That person over there only eats vegetables. Well, we're meat eaters. So they're stupid. Yeah. So nothing that they say can be valid.
Which goes back to that original one of the French guy when he's talking about community was kind of curated from your existence. And if you've made those decisions, then it isn't curated from your existence.
I'm not following. Sorry.
Instead of it being mandated by proximity.
Yes.
It is curated to your own personal desire.
I think that part of community requires a vulnerability that we as a culture have kind of put on the back burner in many instances.
I
I would
think
agree.
that's valid.
I
That's a
mean,
valid point.
you're right. My neighbor does feed me multiple times a week, and I love them for that. But at the same time, like when we first talked and met the first time, I didn't say and walk away. And we both have shared moments in time in life and what's going on and struggles and celebrations. Like there's a vulnerability there that is required in order for us to be where we are.
You've made a statement here by Putnam that says lower social capital correlates with lower trust, poorer health outcomes, and weaker democratic participation. And I think that's what we're really talking about, that if you are choosing not to participate, or if you are choosing not to be vulnerable, or you're choosing to be selfish, then there again is a cost to that community, to
Absolutely.
yourself and
I,
to the community.
I think it's broader even than that. Going back to what I was just saying, to say that only my community is allowed to be correct. Only my community is allowed to we're the only ones who are right. We're the only ones who have a right to exist. Anything like that, to say, to demonize another community just because you're not in it, is to me fallacy. Because what if that community can provide something for your community, and then you can build a relationship between the two? And we are not allowing ourselves as a society to do that anymore. We are, in my personal opinion, quite intentionally being driven apart as communities so that we don't get that advantage.
And I think that is happening at the hand of people who don't want to fight those communities in any capacity to keep them weak.
I would agree.
So what do you do?
Turn off
If
the
you
fucking TV, turn off the news, and talk to someone.
Grab stuff off the shelves, offer to help, be kind, take time out of your own life to listen to somebody else and what they're going through and be empathetic and help when you can. Paying those costs,
Go outside and touch some grass.
not in your shoes, with your toes.
pickle them.
Wiggle them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, side thought, are we here a community or a family?
Yes. It's that Venn diagram, mama girl.
Yeah.
I mean, but think about it. There are things that we experience and we talk about that we don't talk about with other members of our family, not out of hiding it, but because it's not relevant to them. And
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to come to you guys. We got this weird TikTok comment and I don't know how to respond to them. I'm not going to go to Dad or Trey and say, hey, how do I respond to this? I mean, it's just different overlaps because I think I can't remember who I heard this analogy from. Friendship in general, I think you could apply community here too. I think that there are different levels of friendship and community. And so the analogy that I kind of live by is you have different levels of people in your life. You have people in your life, and this is all metaphorically speaking mostly, but the physical is the analogy itself. But there are people that you are fine and happy to greet at your front door. And hey, I'm so glad you came. Hey, thanks for dropping this by, whatever that may be. But they don't ever come inside. That's a certain level of relationship, of friendship. And then you've got people who you're bringing them into your kitchen and they're helping you cook food or they're cooking for you, whatever that may be. That's a different level of friendship. And then again, metaphorically, then you've got people that you're welcoming into your most inner thoughts. Think of it like your bed that is sacred and yours, and you don't let everybody into your bed. At least I hope you don't let everybody into your bed. But I'm not judging if you do, but still. So, I mean, that when you're really going through the thick of it and you're wiped out and you can't get up and the house is a mess and you can't clean and you're depressed and having this hard time and you just don't know what to do, that these are the people that you welcome into your bed and they come to help you. They come to love on you, even though the kitchen is a mess and it's embarrassing. And even though you haven't done this out in the rest of the house, like that's a different level of friendship. And I think that we have to be okay with those levels in order for it to work well. You don't have to let everybody into your bed when you're having the hardest day of your life. You don't have to
Right.
let them all in on all of that. But if you don't let anybody in, that's when that loneliness really creeps in and says, Callie, sucks to be you. You're the
Yeah.
only person in the entire world who has ever experienced this and whoever has felt like this. And so, sorry about your bad luck.
All the stories you can tell.
All the stories that you can tell.
Well, I think that you guys have. I'm going to make you print out the Chat GPT about our differences of what community is. I'm going to say to you that I'm standing a little bit firm on what I think community is. And it's not that I'm discounting what y'all think community is, but I think you've boxed me in a little bit more than you should have. So I'm going to have to study that a little bit and see
Ruminate.
see if that really changes my mind about what I think community is. Because I'm still struggling with, and I get your point, Cole, but I'm still struggling that community is the old lady asking you to get something off of the top shelf.
Because
That's an interaction to me, not necessarily community.
Yes, but it has a ripple effect that comes from that. So she asked Cole to grab it. Cole did it with gladness in his heart and handed it to her with a smile on his face. And now she goes and tips the person at the counter because she appreciated what Cole did. And so I think that that ripple effect has much bigger impact than Cole stopping to grab it off the shelf.
But maybe it doesn't have any other effect. Maybe she just takes it from the top shelf when he hands it to her and goes on about her business. So if there's no further interaction,
And she
Right,
never
but
thinks about
I
it again.
participated in community because she asked me to, because I perceived her as a part of the community.
and
And
I
then if she
understand that
goes
part.
and decides that she no longer wants to participate in community, that doesn't make me less a part of the community. It may make her less a part of the community.
Yeah.
But like, think about community service. If you're going up and you're picking up trash on the side of the highway, what percentage of people driving down that highway do you know and interact with? Less than one?
Depends on the highway.
Yes.
I mean, I'm talking about our physical I-35 running through our town. How many people drive on that highway every day? Like, what percentage of the people that are on that highway every day do you interact with? But they're still part of your community.
And she who is so adamant to set recycling aside and to keep things clean and to make sure that we're picking up trash in this instance or that, like, you're thinking about it differently because even though you are not so like consciously saying, oh, I'm going to throw this paper towel away right now so some random stranger that I don't know and I've never interacted with won't have to pick it up off of the highway, you're automatically applying it subconsciously saying, I don't want somebody else to have to deal with my mess. I'll just take care of it. That is community, even though you don't know them.
Just like Callie's saying, there are different levels of community. I'm not going to go and rely on for my most severe needs. Every community, I'm not going to go, hey, disc golf Facebook group, I'm sick. Will somebody send me chicken noodle soup? No. But
And you're not
I'm
going to
still
go
a
to
part of that
every
community.
you're not going to go to every single neighbor and just never buy sugar again because you can get it from all your neighbors. It's fine.
Depends on the price of sugar.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. I still think y'all have shortchanged me just a little bit, but it's interesting to become aware of the differences that we think about on this, how it's defined. So, Gig, do you have a weird thought for us?
I have a weird thought that I am so curious about your takes on it. Are you ready? So, you are on a plane. You have just been made aware that the plane is going to crash. They have asked the plane crew and everybody, they have asked if there is anybody who knows how to land a plane who can help. There are two people a man and a woman who both stand up offering to help land the plane. The choice is yours. Who do you choose? The man
Both
or the
of
woman?
them. Cockpits have 2 seats.
Oh, that's wise.
Mom?
This is going to get me in more trouble.
Perfect.
I am going to say, I'm going to go from a gut reaction of how they look.
Interesting.
And it's not a male-female thing, but it's how much believability they present. When they stand up and say, I can land the plane, then I probably would not choose that person. But if they stand up and say, I've been a pilot for 5 years, I think I can do this, I'm going to go with that person.
Interesting. So here's my take, which is totally different than both of yours. I'm going to choose the woman.
Why?
Because a man will apply for any job that he is only 60% qualified for.
That's true.
A woman would not apply for a job that she is not 100% qualified to do.
That's an interesting.
And there is data and statistics to back all of this up, research to back all of this up. So don't come for me, Cole. I don't want to hear it. I will send you the articles, but it is statistically proven that a man will apply for a job that he is only 60% qualified for, whereas a woman would not apply unless she is 100% confident and qualified for the job. 100% of the tasks that it requires.
I have worked with both men and women who were not qualified for the job.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. But when shit is hitting the fan and the plane is quite literally going down, if a woman stands up and says, I can do it, I trust her.
That's
much more than the man who was like, I can figure it out.
What about the woman who's on the flight who the crew says, hey, is there a doctor on board? And she says, well, my husband is a doctor.
Yeah, I'm not trusting her. But she's straightforward about it. I'm not a doctor. Like, no,
but
lady,
she's
you're
saying,
still
well,
not a
I'm
doctor.
my husband, so I must be qualified.
I don't think it works like that.
That's what I'm saying.
I think that's a really
that takes your entire premise and throws it out the window, because this woman who is not 100% qualified is saying that she is.
No, she isn't.
No, she's not.
She's saying my husband is, so I can try and figure it out.
Which is not 100% qualified.
But she didn't say she was 100%
literally
qualified.
Eliminates your entire premise.
No, not buying it.
No, I think it's an interesting premise, Callie, and I would not have thought about it that way, but you do have statistics behind you. You might be right. I just hadn't thought about it that way.
It's the 100% that gets me, because that is verifiably false.
Okay, I'll send you the research. Mom, hit us with a good news story.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Speaking of women
and community. So New York Times had a story about a group of women who are now in their 70s. They have been meeting twice a month, except for July and August, for the last 44 years. They started meeting and they had a paid facilitator. That's how it came about. It was kind of a mommy and me group in a community center, and they started meeting. And so they had, which I think this is, I mean, my brain went ding, ding, ding. It's the facilitator and the psychologist that was meeting with them that makes this really unique and different. But they started out and it was just to learn how to best nurture their families as they were beginning their families, how to maintain a strong marriage, how to continue to be an individual and be part of that marriage and not be isolated, all of those kinds of things. It was very confidential. It wasn't, we talk about this all over the place, but they began 44 years ago to talk to each other about their struggles, triumphs, issues with their children, teenagers rebelling, and marriages, and this one's drinking too much, or what do I do with my career, or how do I decide to do this, or even illness, or the loss of parents, those kinds of things. But the discussions evolved and the problems kind of changed over the course of the years. And while it's not really therapy because it's a big group, but it's not just a social gathering either. It was real life, face-to-face interaction. Wasn't always amicable. I mean, there were a couple of them who said, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this because I don't like the way so-and-so spoke to me or such and such happened. But they just kept going and they made it a significant priorities. I mean, their families knew that on those nights that were set aside, mom was going to go to group. And so I think that's really amazing. They have not invited anybody else to join their group in 35 years. And part of the reason is because they say they speak in shorthand. They've talked to each other so much that they have, I mean, it's like having an inside joke. They have these little stories that they can go, oh, remember X or remember Y. And they go on and they said it would be too hard to get somebody else in up to speed on all of that. They will tell you that in many ways, group carried them through the joys and tears of the years. And just that their story reminds us that community isn't something you feel just in good moments, but something that you practice through consistency and intentionality. And that the payoff can be relationships that truly outlast time itself. It was
I
a
love
sweet
that.
story about a group of women.
There are 6 of them, correct?
Now there are 6. It started out with 10, and they've lost one who passed away, and some of them have moved away from the area. But even some of them who have moved away continue to come in on Zoom or Skype, whatever that is, whatever they're doing at the moment to participate. And while they say that's a little bit different than being there in the group, they're still participating in that group. And at this point in time, their children are coming into where they started this and recognizing how much it must have impacted their moms to have something like that to
Rely
participate in.
upon.
Mhm.
Wow.
So great story. 44 years. They weren't all friends to start out. They were, in some ways, some of them were strangers. That is community.
That is one definition of community.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It is a good one.
So, love you guys.
Love y'all.
Love you too.